Welcome, Minister Gorman. We're delighted to have you. It's great to have a Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. We were saying earlier before you joined the call that it's quite a brief and it's certainly, even if you had one day a week, it'd be hard to get everything done. But so we're very grateful anyway for your time. So the initiative, this is an initiative between schools in Northern Ireland and the Republic. So we have 4 schools and it's a joint initiative between Politics and Action in Northern Ireland and the Glencree Centre for Peace and Reconciliation in Wicklow. So we have 4 schools that are involved this year. We have Lutterellstown in Dublin, so it's nearish your constituency.
Right in the middle of my constituency.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. We have Loretto in Donegal. We have Dominican College in Belfast, and we also have Ballyclare High School in Ballyclare, County Antrim. So they work over the year over different topics they've been looking at. And today they have a series of questions for you. So if you don't mind, we'll get straight into it, unless you wanted to have any opening remarks to start off.
But just to say good afternoon to yourself and to particularly to all the students today. It's really nice to be here. It's again somewhat weird situation where I can see individuals and I can see groups on the screen. It's not quite the same as if we were able to meet in person, but look, we're all working in these situations. And I suppose what it does allow is engagement with 4 schools in very different parts of the island at the same time. So look, I'm really looking forward to engaging with you. I gather you spoke to Leo Varadkar a couple of weeks ago, and he said he was grilled very thoroughly. So I've been prepping for this, and hopefully you'll give me the thumbs up at the end of our meeting. But just to say, it's a really good project, and welcome the work that your schools are doing, and particularly the Glencree Centre as well. In its many years and decades at this stage of work on these North-South initiatives.
Well, thank you. So the first, we have 5 questions under the first heading, which is more kind of about ministerial roles. And the first comes from Kyle Lang, who is in Lutterellstown Community College. Kyle, do you want to ask your question?
Hiya. Do you think that as Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, you'll make it a priority of the current government to show more transparency in the processing and collecting of data and litigation against the state in the wake of the recent autism dossier scandal?
Hi, Kyle. Thanks a million for that question. Look, I think the way we're all learning about the importance of how we treat data in general, and I'll speak specifically to the dossier issue in a moment, but particularly, I suppose, in the context of Minister dealing with the commission of the report on mother and baby homes and the huge amount of information that now lies in my department and that we're providing people access to in connection with adoptees looking for information about their birth mother or their birth parent, which currently under the law they're not entitled to get, but we're hopefully bringing in a law by the end of this year that will allow them access to that information, really crucial information that we all take for granted about who we are. In the context of the issue of disability, as you know, we are creating a new department here. This used just to be the Department of Children, but we've added equality, integration and disability into this department. And a lot of that is taking the issue of disability out of the Department of Health. Because look, the Department of Health is great, but it's just such a massive area. And it has so much to do in terms of GPs, in terms of our major hospitals, in terms of nursing homes. And I think there is a concern that the very specific needs of persons with a disability, and look, we know they're incredibly varied from, someone with an intellectual disability to someone with a physical disability. The things that the state needs to do to support people with disabilities are so different. And that needs one department focused on that issue. And that's what we're trying to do with this department, create a department focused on the needs of people with vulnerability, whether they have a disability, whether they're a new migrant into this country, whether they're a child. And in doing that, we need to, I think, take a new approach to how we engage with people with disabilities and their parents when the person with a disability is a child. And too often people have had to fight for their rights. And as you alluded to, Kyle, fight through court cases, actually take the government to court each time. So I want to see a much more open engagement with parents. I'd like to see us able to address things without having to resort to courts. And if a situation comes where something does go to court, I think we absolutely have to be both respect our legal obligations as regards data protection. There's legal obligations, but there's moral obligations too. And I think that's probably the issue with those dossiers. Whereas I think it was legal, the collection of the data. There is a big question about the ethics around the collection of that data. And I hope we will take a much different approach in this new department we're creating. So I hope that addresses the question, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle. Our next question comes from Kate Sweeney in Loretto in Donegal. Kate, if you'd like to ask a question.
Hi. So the recent publishing of the white paper in relation to direct provision, do you feel like this is adequate action taken, or do you think there's still more to be done? If so, what amendments?
Thanks a million, Kate. Well, look, I worked very hard to get the white paper published and get it published quickly. Because the white paper is about ending direct provision, and that's what we committed to doing in this government. And as Minister, that's what I'm committed to achieving. And the white paper gives us the path as to how we're going to do that. I think it's a really strong document. It recognises that direct provision can't just be abolished overnight. There's 7,700 people in the system right now, and we need to provide good, dignified housing for them. And we all know there's a housing crisis in our country at the moment. So the work my department does to provide adequate, proper housing for those in direct provision cannot interfere with the work the Department of Housing and indeed local authorities are doing to make sure everybody has a house in the country. But I think the white paper sets out a very clear path as to how we can get adequate human rights compliant housing for everyone who's waiting for a decision as to whether they get asylum, but a range of other supports as well in terms of education, in terms of English language supports, in terms of support if they want to enter the job market while they're waiting for a decision. But even support in terms of, I made a directive recently to ensure everyone in direct provision has access to free period products, because as we know, period poverty is an issue in our country, and it can be something that could particularly impact people in direct provision who don't have their own sources of income. So we've a vision that by the end of 2024, direct provision will be ended. And everything will be done by then. But we have a range of steps that we will be achieving as we move towards there. All of those steps will make life better for people in direct provision at the moment. But the one thing I will say, Kate, is I don't think we could get this done any more quickly than 2024. And I know many opposition people will say, oh, that's too long. I genuinely don't think we could do this right and do it any quicker. It'll be tough to get it done by 2024, but I believe we can do it. But I genuinely don't think the entire system could be entirely changed any quicker than the timeline we've sent out. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. Our next question is from Daisy Johnson in Ballyclare High School in Ballyclare, County Antrim. Daisy, would you like to ask your question?
Yep. So my question is, does the government have any long-term plans to combat climate change? And what's the relationship like between Northern Ireland and the Republic on this particular issue?
Hi, Daisy. How are you? I will. So look, I'll talk about what the government here in the Republic are doing first. Maybe we have just brought into the Dáil piece of legislation, the Climate Action Bill, which is the major piece of the work that we're going to do. It's actually modelled a lot on the UK Climate Action Bill, which was brought in 2008, which at the time was a really, really kind of modern piece. So we're centred on that. And the UK uses this system of carbon budgets, where it says we're going to emit this amount of carbon over the next 5 years, the subsequent 5 years, and the subsequent 5 years. So it allows business, it allows industry kind of plan So they understand, well, actually in 10 years' time, 50% of our energy has to come from renewables. So now is a good time to invest in wind farms or invest in energy efficiency devices, because there will be a real demand for them in 10 years, because we know, according to the carbon budget, we have to be cutting X amount of carbon at that time. And I think that will be really effective. We haven't had that approach in Ireland before. So we're bringing in the carbon budget, but we're also saying we'll have net carbon neutrality by 2050, which is the date at which kind of all the commitments under the Paris Agreement have to be achieved. So the bill will set out kind of the infrastructure and the rules. Then obviously we have to do kind of day-to-day measures. We're putting a very significant amount of money into retrofitting houses to make them more energy efficient. We're undertaking a major planting scheme across the country, more trees. We're going to try and stop the bogs being drained and being dug up for turf, and actually use the bogs as a carbon sink. So there's a huge range of issues that we're following up on, both in terms of climate, but also biodiversity as well, because that's just important. And I think in the last 10 years, the focus has been on climate, but we're losing so many plants, we're losing so many species of animals across the globe as well, that the biodiversity crisis is just as significant. In terms of the engagement with Northern Ireland, I think is it Nicola Mallon who deals with the environmental portfolio at the moment, and I know Eamon Ryan, who's the environment minister here, has been engaging with her. And I met with Nicola at one of the North-South ministerial councils, and we chatted about some of these issues. I do know there's a climate action bill in front of the Northern Ireland, the Assembly as well. It was my colleagues in the Northern Irish Green Party, Claire Bailey, who introduced that. I'm not sure if that has cross-party support. I've looked at it, and I see it's a very significant piece of law, but I think it might be fair to say that one or two of the parties in Northern Ireland are maybe not as concerned about climate as others, and I think certainly wouldn't be as concerned as we are in the Green Party. And I do think that's probably some bit of a barrier to collective action maybe been taken on both sides of the border.
Does that answer your question, Daisy, or do you have any follow-up questions for the Minister?
No, that's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daisy, appreciate it. Because
Ballyclare as well as Loretto are in rural constituencies, so obviously climate change affects everybody. I know they have a strong working farming community as well in those areas.
Absolutely, and look, working with farmers and working with the agricultural sector is absolutely essential to enabling us to reach our targets, but also enabling a sustainable future for farming as well. Because I think we've seen certainly in the Republic, farming has been decimated over the last number of years, and particularly small to medium-sized farmers. Their income has fallen; they're not able to get an income from the land anymore. So much of what we're trying to do is support farmers in terms of using their land in alternative ways, not to in any way drive people off the land, but just looking at alternative ways where we can farm in a more sustainable manner.
Mm-hmm. And
I think too often there's this attempt to kind of pit farmers against kind of climate activists, and I certainly don't buy that at the minute. You know, the support of the farming community is absolutely essential, but I think, you know, ignoring the issues of climate as maybe some of the very big farmers organizations sometimes suggest we do, isn't a feasible way to go forward either.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just hearing one of my colleagues saying there that that support for the Claire Bailey bill, for the Green Party bill up here, has all party support except for the DUP and the TUV. So there is a good support for it.
Yeah. So
the next question comes from Diana Orzu from Lutterellstown Community College in Dublin. Diana, do you want to ask your question?
So one new issue within your area of responsibilities have you become the most determined to improve since you took on your role?
Thanks, Diana. But look, I'll give you a politician's answer first and say all of them. Obviously, I want to make everything much better. And that's a politician's answer. It's also a genuine answer. Like, there are so many like I was so excited to be appointed to this department because there's so many issues that I'm passionate about. Like I'm in the Green Party, and obviously the Green Party is associated with the environment, but I'm very passionate about social justice issues and you know, in that area. So there's just so many important areas where I feel I can improve things. We talked a bit about direct provision earlier. That's something I've been involved in for a very long time, and I have the opportunity to end it and bring about a new system. So I'm absolutely determined to do something there. In terms of, I also mentioned the issue of the mother and baby homes and our response to institutional abuse that took place and the state allowed to take place for almost our country's entire history. And that's an awful legacy. And I'm absolutely determined to do my very best to provide for survivors, whether it's in terms of reparation payments, whether it's in terms of giving them information about their early life, whether it's in terms of making sure that where people who died in these institutions were badly treated, were buried in inappropriate ways, that we resolve that. That's a huge body of work, and it's work for people who have been terribly let down by the state over decades. So I'm very determined to address those issues as well. But you know, there's even, you know, there's just so much across the department, you know, making it easier for parents to get childcare for their children, making that a little bit cheaper. You know, I don't have kids myself, but a lot of my friends are having their first or second at the moment, and they're constantly texting me saying it's so expensive for childcare at the moment. And that's a big worry for a lot of parents and a lot of young families across the country right now. And if I can do something on that as well, I know I'm helping a lot of people as well. So look, as I say, there's so many things in this department that I'm really passionate about, but those are three things that so it's come to mind right now.
Does that answer your question, Deanna?
Yes, thank you.
I see you. I like your Jigsaw D15 hoodie there, Deanne. They're a great organization. I used to be on their board a few years ago. They're a great team.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last question in this kind of section comes from Manus O'Connell, who is in Loretto in Donegal. And Manus, do you want to actually talk a little bit about, I know you're doing something here, part of your final, aren't you, for your...
Yeah. That's question for the project for that. And I've done some, I was just wondering what you think of it. Do you think that imposing an age restriction on smartphone ownership would be a protection or denial of children's rights for an age restriction for children? Like?
Thanks, Manus. I was actually talking about this issue to some students in another local school in Dublin 15 in my own area there last week, and they done. I don't know, as part of your project whether you've done kind of some research on data about when people first got their first phones and the age. Like the girls I was talking to were saying most people got their first smartphone around 8, which I have to say was a real shock to me. I didn't think children or parents were giving them to children at that age. As regards a specific age, I think a lot of the focus has to be placed back on the big tech companies in terms of they should be doing more to protect people who are using, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, all the various platforms. They need to be doing more. Like, you can put an age ban on, you can definitely do that, but you know, so many parents will just ignore it and buy something for their kids anyway, and it will be very difficult to enforce an age ban. So my view is, let's actually just make the internet broadly safer for young people, and let's have the procedures put in place that where inappropriate material or even where an instance of social media being used to bully or something like that is taking place, that there's much quicker responses by the tech companies. And my colleague Catherine Martin, she's the Minister for Media, she's doing a media and online safety bill at the moment. So this is a piece of law that will put a much bigger obligation on the firms to actually act, both in terms of someone makes complaints saying someone's put up some inappropriate material, whether it's about you or just generally inappropriate, that these companies have a much quicker obligation to take down material. but they also have a much greater obligation to be actively policing what's happening on forums, what's happening on their various platforms, and act if something inappropriate is happening. So I think that's where the focus should be, Manus. Whereas I do see an argument for the age restriction, I'm just not sure how enforceable it is, to be honest.
And Manus, what are you finding yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, well, just when I was looking, kind of getting the age children are getting phones, getting more younger. Like for first years, it was about 10 was when they were getting it, and then there's a lot more 8-year-olds getting it in primary schools. So I was just wondering if I could email you after this just to put on a few more points. And if you could reply to that, would be great from a project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to do so. Yeah.
Good man, Manus. That's it. Politics in action right here.
Absolutely.
That's great. So what we'll do, we've got 2 questions. We'll take them together. This is around coalition. The first one is from Lauren. Lauren, do you want to ask your question? You're from Lauren's from Dominican College in Belfast.
Wait, can you? Okay. How comfortable are you in a coalition with Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil?
And the second question is coming from Matthew Hull in Loreto in Donegal again. Matthew, do you want to ask your question?
You've been someone who's been involved in the Green Party for a long time. Thus, what do you think the party has learned since the previous coalition from 2007 to 2011 with Fianna Fáil?
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Lauren, for those two questions. Look, I think they're very opposite questions. I suppose it's coming up to just nearly a year now since this coalition was formed. Well, look, I suppose everyone who runs for election runs on the basis of their own party's manifesto. Look, the Green Party is a small party, and I think we always accept that if we're going to be in government, it will be as part of a coalition. And as one of the smaller parties in the coalition. I wasn't a TD, I wasn't a councillor when we were in government in 2007 to 2011, but I was active, as you said, Matthew, within the party, and I would have learned a lot in terms of the programme for government needing to be very detailed, timelines put in for achieving things, not everything being left to the last year sort of thing when maybe the whole government has fallen down, in terms of a clearer understanding between those parties in government about what's trying to be achieved, and if there is a problem, a way of addressing, a way of resolving problems. And I think we did that in the programme for government we negotiated. Now, I suppose I was one of the negotiators for the Green Party, so I'm a bit biased in terms of what we got into it. But I believe that when I see as a party, we got 7% of the vote nationally. We got 12 TDs out of 160. But when I look at the programme for government, I see Green Party policies all over every single page. It's not perfect. There are some elements that I wouldn't be as mad on, but I generally see it as something that moves our country forward in a progressive way on environmental issues, social issues, economic issues, on all the issues that matter to me and matter to the people who voted for me. As regards when I went into this election, I said I was willing to talk to every party about being in the coalition. I didn't say, no, I won't talk to Fine Gael. I didn't say, no, I won't talk to Sinn Féin. And after the election, we did talk to all the parties, but it became clear after a number of weeks that the only set of parties that looked like they were serious in sitting down to negotiate a full programme for government and who would make a majority in the Dáil, because obviously you need your majority in the Dáil, was Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and ourselves. I feel the coalition has worked reasonably well. When I see where we are as a country in terms of, I suppose, particularly in terms of COVID, when I look at other European countries at the moment, many of them are going back into lockdown when we're coming out. And of course, when you look internationally, you have your Indias, you have your Brazils, which are completely out of control in terms of how they're addressing COVID. So the last year has been incredibly difficult, and I know many people have lost family members to COVID, and everyone has lost experiences and lost time with family. And impact on their careers or on their school or their college life. But I do think when you look kind of internationally, I think Ireland has done quite well in how we've managed this crisis, and I think the government have been part of that. So I think, you know, I think the coalition on that and on other areas is working reasonably well. So
Lauren and Matthew, what do you agree? What's your opinion? How do you feel the government has worked? Has it worked well? Has it not worked well?
It's a tough thing to do, being a small party and a sandwich between two larger parties in a coalition. You see it a lot of times that parties that on the smaller end of the spectrum in a coalition typically tend to take the blame for any failings of the government in the future. So how do you plan to prevent that, or do you think it's an inevitable thing that the Green Party may be blamed for some of the government's shortfalls?
No, I think that's a very fair observation, Matthew. And nearly all times in Irish history, the smaller coalition party suffers. And look, the way I look at it is, if in hopefully maybe 3 years' time, when this government is over, if I lose my seat and we've achieved a significant portion of what we set out in the programme for government, I'm okay with that. Like, I didn't join the Green Party to get a safe seat. It took me, what was it, 16 years running before I got into the Dáil. So I didn't join the Greens just to get into the Dáil because it was easy. I joined the Greens and I ran for the Greens because of the things that I believe in this party. I think I have the opportunity, and we have the opportunity, to implement a lot of those things over the next 3 years. And at the end of that period, I'll go back to my voters and say, I said I'd do X during the general election. This is what I have done. If you think that's enough, or if you think that's right, please re-elect me. If you don't, that's fine. But I do think that if you want to see change in your country, you have to give government a go. I don't think oppositions can change maybe one or two things in the context of 5 years in opposition, but government ministers can change things every day. And I do see that you can change things. Some of them are big, some of them are small, but every day I have the opportunity to kind of make something positive, and that's what I'm going to try and do.
Thanks for that follow-up, Matthew, and also to Lauren. So the next series of questions, we'll take them one at a time, are general politics. The first is from Martina Pollock, again in Lutterellstown in Dublin. Martina, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. So since you're involved in the campaign Live Out Loud, which celebrates young LGBT people, do you know if there are any bills or policies in the plans in the government to support or further help LGBT people?
Yeah, hi Martina, thanks for your question. Yeah, there are. I was talking about one actually earlier today with some people. We're looking at a bill to ban conversion therapy. So this is this idea, and I think it's a untrue idea, that if you're gay or that you can be changed. Someone can, you know, do psychotherapy on you or pray over you, and your sexual orientation can be changed. So we are looking to ban that practice in Ireland. I know it's been banned in a number of other European countries as well. And I think particularly for young people who, you know, coming out is a difficult time for anybody. And the idea that someone could be told that what they're thinking is sinful or is because they're sick or something like that, I think is really damaging for young people. And we want to ensure that that doesn't happen. We're also looking at the definitions of equality legislation, and particularly the whole idea of gender identity, because that's not properly protected in Irish law at the moment. And that's something that I'll be working on. That falls directly within my department. And I think we're also trying to, I suppose, use the opportunity, and being a minister, being gay myself, to highlight these issues on an international sphere. So you might know in Poland over the last year or so, there's been a significant rolling back of the rights of LGBTI plus people. So I met with the Polish ambassador a number of months ago, and I kind of made the points about our very real concern, both in some of the changes in law, but particularly some of the language that politicians have used. And I think, you know, politicians, and it's a thing that you know we have in Ireland as well. Politicians using very inflammatory language about LGBTI plus people, and particularly for young people going through, you know, that difficult time in coming out. I really think that can be very damaging. So we raised it in the terms of Poland, but you know, I'm also conscious it still happens here in Ireland. Not as much anymore, but it can still happen, and we have to be vigilant about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just to say, in Northern Ireland, that was just passed by the executive last week, the ban on conversion therapy. It will take some time to be written into law, but it was passed last week. So yeah, that's good. Do you have any follow-up comments or questions, Martina?
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
That's great, and look, I think it is very important that we're taking on these issues, that we're taking a similar approach, both north and south. Mm-hmm. So that will strengthen my arguments that we need to pass this law here as well. And look, I'll examine the text, because we were even just looking at text today, and I'll examine the text of the provision brought in Northern Ireland.
Very good. Our next question on a different topic comes from Jake Turner, and Jake is from Ballyclare High School. Jake, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, how do you feel the Irish-Sea border has affected the Republic of Ireland?
Hi Jake, how are you doing? Thanks for that question. Yeah, I was thinking about this one, and to be honest, with things being as strange as they are with COVID and all the restrictions on kind of normal movement, I think we need to go back to normal to understand the impact of Brexit and the various movement changes. I just don't think right now is the right time to assess the kind of the practical impact of the Irish Sea border, because all sorts of movement have been completely changed. So I can't probably give a detailed answer to that. I think we probably need to wait a year post-COVID, and then we get a real understanding. Look, I am aware, and it kind of bleeds into some of the later questions in terms of, I think it's really important, and there's a strong desire among my government that we continue to have free movement with Northern Ireland in every extent possible, that we don't in any way have, you know, queues at the border or anything like that. We don't have impact on, I suppose, the day-to-day trade that happens between shops and farmers and communities on either side of the border, people traveling to and from work, to and from school. Like, it is, you know, compared to 15 or 20 or 25 years ago, the difference in terms of that very open border is really, really positive, and we don't want anything that's going to damage or undermine that in any way.
And Jake, do you have any kind of comments you want to make on that? Do you have any opinion on how you feel about it, or any follow-up question?
No, I don't have any follow-up questions. Yeah, that's a pretty helpful answer. Yeah.
Cheers. That's great. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you. And our next question deals with Brexit, and it comes from Kathleen Loy, and Kathleen's from Dominican College in Belfast. Go ahead, Kathleen. Or Caitlin, sorry, I'm calling you Kathleen.
Does Brexit lead to fewer rights and protections for Northern citizens?
Hi, Caitlin. Nice to meet you. Well, look, before I was minister, I was a lecturer in law lecturer in Dublin City University, and I taught EU law. So I'm a very strong believer in the European Union. So I just no surprise. I think Brexit is a bad idea. I think there's plenty of things you can criticize the European Union about, but I think by and large the European Union has been beneficial for all the member states and for the citizens of member states. And I look at so much of the laws we brought in Ireland since we joined in '72, and so many of the progressive laws that have improved rights for women, for LGBTI+, for minorities, for travellers, for people with disability, but also for consumers, for our environment. Certainly in Ireland, many of them have originated from the European Union and are as a direct result of our membership. And I suppose if the pressure from the EU hadn't been there, I think Ireland would be a very different place and a much less progressive place, and I think a much less open society as well. And if I felt the role that the EU plays in ensuring we as a country remain open and progressive, if I felt that was gone because Ireland had left, I'd certainly be very worried about rights. As someone who's directly benefited from rights from the European Union, I'd be very worried. Now, I'm conscious that I'm sure among, particularly from the schools from the north, there are people with different views on Brexit. It was never for me to tell people in the north or people in the rest of the UK what their views were, what they should vote. But certainly I see Brexit as a negative, and I am every day grateful that Ireland continues to be part of the European Union. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. And our next question is from Bailey Snowden. Bailey's asking the question from Dominican College. Bailey's standing in for Rosie Huddleston, who can't be here today. So go ahead, Bailey.
Is the southern state now more progressive than the north?
Hi, Bailey. Well, you guys have just brought in the ban on conversion therapy, and we haven't yet. So on that one, yourselves are certainly ahead of us. I think in terms of laws, we're probably in and around the same. I think maybe in terms of attitude and public attitude, there probably is still a bit of a difference. I haven't been up for Pride in Belfast for a couple of years now, but I do remember the last time I was there, marching in the parade, the very extensive counter demonstration that took place on the day. And indeed, I think I've probably been up for Pride 3 times, and there was always, and it wasn't like Pride in Dublin, you might have one old fella being like, oh, down with that sort of thing or something like that. Whereas in Belfast, it was a very significant number of people, very clearly organised. And that was a shock to me, to be honest, to see that happening. And I suppose we were maybe talking about the language that politicians use. And I think down in the Republic, very few politicians would say anything openly hostile to the LGBTI plus community anymore. Very few. There'd be one or two maybe, but even that would be quite mild. Whereas I think there are some politicians in the north who would still say what I would regard as extremely kind of aggressive or unpleasant things about the LGBTI plus community. Not many, but there are some. And I think that difference in approach, like every party in the Republic is very comfortable in advocating for LGBTI plus rights, very comfortable with it, and do so. And I don't think, again, that's probably not the same in Northern Ireland. There's probably one or two parties that are still quite uncomfortable with that. So I think it's probably, and again, you know, that's just coming from my view here, it's probably an issue of kind of maybe attitudes of society where there's, or the attitudes of some of society, it should be said, that where there is a difference.
What do you think, Bailey? Do you think that the southern state is more progressive, or is Northern Ireland more progressive?
I think that both have their own sort of progressiveness. So, like you said, for laws and attitudes, both would be in different states of progression.
Yeah.
Very good. And our last question, it comes from Ballyclare High School, and it's coming from Jack Ferguson. Jack, do you want to ask your question?
All right. Do you think the UK should help Ireland with the vaccine rollout, and does NI have a duty to help with this?
Thanks for that, Jack. I suppose following UK's leaving the European Union, the regulatory scheme for COVID, for the COVID vaccines was a bit different. The UK had its own regulator and it was able to start the vaccine rollout earlier. And I know a kind of a different approach in that the UK approach is give everyone the first dose as quickly as possible and then get around to the second, whereas in Ireland, we're trying to keep the first and second dose a good bit closer. We've made great progress. We've got 1.4 million doses given out at this point. So I don't think we need help right now, to be honest. I know we're a little bit behind in terms of coverage, but we've got a very clear pathway in terms of making up. And obviously, I know UK would have major reliance on AstraZeneca. We're focusing a bit more on the Pfizer vaccine and using that. And as we see it, that's a bit more flexible, particularly because, you know, there's some restrictions on AstraZeneca following the blood clotting, the very small number of blood clots, but they're none the same. What I would say though, Jack, is I think Ireland and the UK and all of Europe, as we go through this summer and get our population substantially vaccinated, we all have an obligation to do more in terms of the rest of the world. I think there's like maybe 1.4% of Africa vaccinated at this stage. We're seeing what's happening in India at the moment, and there's a major international effort to support India in terms of looking after the people who are unwell, but really we need to be supporting these countries in terms of vaccinations. So that's where I think the help needs to be. Those developed countries, those countries that have been successful in the rollout need to come together and make a real effort to start supporting vaccinations in countries where they don't have the capacity to do so yet. Both because it's the right thing to do, but also because if we let the disease reign unchecked in those countries, more variants will develop and they'll come back and kind of bite us in the end. So we should do it because it's the right thing to do first and foremost, but it's also in our interest that across the world we decisively tackle COVID. So I hope that answers the question, Jack.
Yeah, thank you.
And Jack, what do you think yourself? Do you think other countries have an obligation to help those nearest to them?
Yeah.
You do. Yep. Good man. You're a good chair. That's good. So that's, Minister, that's the end of the questions. But before we go, I wondered if you had any words of encouragement to these young budding politically minded students. As you were once yourself, I know you got, well, your first was at 10 years old and you went to your start campaigning for the Green Party. Is that what I read?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose just I've been active in politics a long time, and I'm active because I have seen campaigns that I've been involved in and involved in with so many others actually bring real tangible results. When the Green Party were in government from 2007 2011, marriage equality wasn't a thing. At that stage, we brought in civil partnerships, which was always a halfway house, and we saw it as a stepping stone. There was a big debate in Ireland, like, is this too much even? There were some who were saying this is too much and it'll undermine marriage. Some of the churches and the Catholic Church were very critical of it. But we used the introduction of civil partnership to make the case for same-sex marriage. And, you know, I remember campaigning in that referendum, campaigning with groups and individuals from all over the country, from all different political persuasions. Similarly, as regarding repealing the 8th Amendment, and what we've done now in direct provision, people have been campaigning against direct provision for 21 years, and now we've the opportunity to end it. So look, I think it's very, you know, people can be very cynical about politics and about politicians. And look, there's plenty to criticize in terms of how politicians act, and maybe in terms of over-promising. But I certainly believe that political activism can bring about real change and very substantive change, and sometimes in a much quicker time frame than you might think. Like the speed with which public opinion turned on same-sex marriage, the speed with which public opinion turned on the abortion rights in Ireland was really dramatic. And sometimes You know, sometimes it takes years and years and years, but sometimes there's a sudden swing. People just be like, yeah, we get it, we need to change. And we're hopefully in terms of climate change, seeing that kind of dramatic change in people's mindsets at the moment. But to bring about that change in mindset, it's because people have been active and campaigning, and some of it on the political side, some of it on the kind of social side, some of it's through academics talking, being expert about these things, but it all comes together to shift public mood. And politics is part of that. It's not the only part of it, but it is an important part of it, because at the end of the day, you still need politicians to write the new laws that are better than the old ones, that replaces the old ones. I think if you're interested in seeing change in your country, being politically involved, whether it's, you know, given most of your life to it as I have, or even just being, you know, a member of a party or a member of a group, is an important and a valuable thing to do.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today and this afternoon, and thanks to the students and their teachers who've been really kind of doing a lot of work behind the scenes in the midst of going back to school and having exams on top of it. So we're really grateful, and to Politics in Action and to Glencree as well, and particularly to Alan, who's behind the scenes doing all the tech. So once again, Minister, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Look, thanks to all the classes for coming and for your attention, and particularly thanks to everyone for the questions. I hope I was able to give some answers that were interesting and useful. And look, best of luck as you continue on with this program. So thanks very much. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Thank you.